asking you to do is, if there's any law enforcement witness that you have that you're going to call and they have a criminal history.
Correct.
Or any material information that can be used to impeach them or that's beneficial for the defense, you are to turn that over to the defense.
Correct.
I think my ruling's clear.
Welcome back to the Second to None Media and the MO3 Case Files. We're going to talk about what the judge allowed and rejected in the Yella Beezy and Trapboy Freddy cases, and why or how judges get to their ruling. When prosecutors build a criminal case, they don't simply walk into court and present every piece of evidence they've collected. Before a jury ever enters the courtroom, attorneys fight over what the jury will actually be allowed to hear. Those battles happen through what's known as motions in limine. In two of Texas's biggest hip-hop cases, the capital murder case against Yella Beezy, judges recently ruled on what evidence could and could not be introduced at trial. Some of the prosecution's requests were granted, others were denied. And those rulings could have a major impact on what jurors ultimately hear. Today, we're breaking down exactly what happened.
Nielsen conceded that sometimes events in lyrics can be true. Last week we heard about rap music concerning how it depicts and glorifies criminal activity and violence. And it speaks to and depicts guns, drug trafficking, the gang lifestyle, degradation of women, foul and overly aggressive and sexually explicit language. But the songs that the state has selected do not contain all that. In fact, they are braggadocious about criminal activity, but the criminal activity mentioned is directly on point to the charged offense. They talk directly about placing bounties for reprisal, they talk about the murder, and they talk about the feud.
Why legal precedent matters in the courtroom. When a judge makes a decision, that decision is not made in a vacuum. One of the biggest factors courts look at is something called legal precedent. Precedent is the principle that courts should follow decisions made in earlier cases when the facts and legal issues are similar. It creates consistency and fairness in the justice system. In this hearing, one of the major discussions centered around whether certain songs and artistic expressions could be used by the prosecution, and whether allowing that evidence would create unfair prejudice against the defendant. The prosecution argued that Texas did not have a case directly matching this situation. Their position was that there was no controlling Texas precedent that completely addressed this exact issue. But the defense pointed the court toward existing legal authority, including Hart versus State, arguing that Texas courts have already addressed situations where evidence could become unfairly prejudicial and influence a jury beyond its actual value as evidence by itself. This is where precedent becomes extremely important. A court does not only ask, has this exact situation happened before? The court also asks, have higher courts already established rules that apply to this type of situation? A controlling precedent is a decision from a court that has authority over the current court. Those decisions must generally be followed unless there is a legal reason to distinguish the case or change the interpretation.
Persuasive precedent, on the other hand, can come from other courts. It does not have to be followed, but it can influence how a judge analyzes an issue. The defense's argument was not simply that the songs should be excluded because they were music. The argument was about whether the evidence could create unfair prejudice, whether it accurately proved something relevant to the case, and whether the danger of influencing the jury outweighed its actual value. That balance is a major part of evidence law. Courts are constantly weighing what information helps a jury decide the facts versus what information could unfairly affect the way a jury views a defendant. So when analyzing this hearing, the bigger legal question is not just about music. It is about evidence, fairness, and how courts apply precedent when facing new situations. Because in the legal system, every case does not have to be identical for the law to apply. Sometimes the most important question is whether the legal principle from a previous case fits the situation in front of the court today.
You don't have First Amendment rights to words that are not yours or speech that isn't yours. More importantly, if we look at the cases where authorship is called into question, it is not commercially produced songs performed by the artists. Authorship is not an issue here, Your Honor. This case is about Dallas rappers airing out their beef with their music. Rap music is part of this case, Your Honor. It is not a side feature to distract or mislead or confuse the jury. And we aren't doing it just to impugn his character. Rather, the lyrics and the music themselves expose the motive between the parties, the relationship between the parties, and in certain places explain the events that led to it. As you heard from Detective Barnes, these were not just words, people were dying. He further told us that everyone in this case has been shot. This evidence, Your Honor, is not unfairly prejudicial. Your Honor, the state is going to ask this court deny the defendant's motion in limine and allow the jury to hear the full story, to understand the motivations between the parties, and to understand what transpired that led to this murder. Thank you.
Yesterday at 3:38, I filed a post-hearing brief and I emailed it to the court. Would you like a paper copy of it? Yes. Mayor Roach? Yes. May it please the court, Your Honor, we just heard Mr. Vela say that the evidence they seek to admit isn't.
The prosecution wanted jurors to hear rap lyrics, interviews, and evidence they believed supported their murder-for-hire theory in the killing of rapper MO3. After hearing testimony from investigators and a rap music expert, the judge allowed only a limited amount of that evidence. Specifically, prosecutors were permitted to use 3 songs: Hitters, Keep It in the Streets, On Your Head. The state argued those songs contained lyrics they believed were relevant to motive and intent. Detectives testified they believed certain lyrics discussed putting money on someone's head or retaliating against rivals. The defense strongly disagreed. Their expert witness testified that rap music often contains fictional stories, exaggerated personas, and artistic expression that should not automatically be interpreted as literal admissions of criminal conduct. Ultimately, the judge decided those 3 songs could be presented to a jury, while leaving it up to jurors to decide what weight, if any, they should carry. The judge also allowed prosecutors to present evidence regarding the alleged feud between Yella Beezy and MO3, testimony related to a DJ Vlad interview, and evidence concerning relationships between individuals prosecutors say are connected to their case.
What the judge did not allow. One thing that often gets overlooked is what prosecutors were not allowed to introduce. Not every request made by the state was granted. The judge excluded or limited several categories of evidence that prosecutors wanted the jury to hear. Among the evidence that was challenged were allegations involving prior nightclub shootings, other unrelated acts of violence, incidents that prosecutors could not sufficiently connect to the charges being tried, additional music and lyrics beyond the specific songs the judge approved. Those rulings matter because courts generally try to prevent jurors from deciding guilt based on unrelated allegations or bad character, rather than evidence directly tied to the charged offense. The jury is supposed to decide the case based on admissible evidence, not every accusation ever made against a defendant.
Why these rulings matter. Many people assume prosecutors can simply show juries every social media post, every song, every interview, and every rumor surrounding a defendant. That's not how trials work. Judges serve as gatekeepers. They decide what evidence meets legal standards for relevance and fairness. Sometimes prosecutors win those arguments. Sometimes the defense wins. And sometimes each side wins a little. That's exactly what happened here. In the Yella Beezy case, prosecutors secured permission to use a limited number of songs and several pieces of relationship evidence, but they did not receive approval for every prior allegation or every piece of music they requested. In the Trapboy Freddy case, prosecutors also faced significant limitations on the amount of music and unrelated conduct they could present. These rulings don't determine guilt or innocence. They simply determine what the jury is allowed to hear before reaching its own verdict. As these cases move closer to trial, we'll continue following every hearing, every ruling, and every filing. Not social media rumors, but the actual court record. If you appreciate fact-based reporting backed by court documents, not rumors, not clickbait, make sure you follow Second to None Media. We're committed to bringing you real cases, real filings, and real conversations that matter. And if you're feeling the music behind today's episode, you're hearing the work of Texas producer Chris Cooley, a producer from San Antonio with deep roots in Texas hip-hop culture. His production brings the sound, energy, and authenticity that help tell these stories in a way only Texas can. Follow Chris Cooley and support independent music creators who are keeping the culture alive, one track at a time. Subscribe to Second to None Media, turn on notifications, and stay connected for more exclusive court coverage, documentaries, interviews, and original content. Real documents, real coverage, real truth. Only on Second to None Media.
Your personal information is valuable, and every time you connect online, you're trusting networks to keep your data safe. Whether you're using public Wi-Fi, traveling, working remotely, or just browsing from home, protecting your online privacy matters. NordVPN helps encrypt your internet connection and adds an extra layer of security while you're online. Right now, NordVPN is offering a summer deal with up to 76% off, plus 4 months free, bringing plans down to as low as $3.37 a month with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Protect your digital life today. Check out the offer by scanning the QR code on the screen.